My life walking into a treatment center was a car coming across the finish line. The engine's on fire, there's no hood, and I'm barely hanging, and the car is about to explode. That was where I was at.
Welcome to the Dr. Suzette Glasner podcast. Today, I am joined by Dennis Prager. Aaron is the son of Dennis Prager, co-founder of PragerU, a nationally syndicated talk show radio host, columnist, and author. Aaron is a young father and is refreshingly open about his personal journey through addiction and recovery. And he is now the host of a new podcast, American Recovery, with Dennis Prager, which I'm personally very excited about. Aaron, thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to have gotten your message. You reached out, and I checked out your stuff. You did amazing stuff so far, shining light in different areas where, a lot of people, quite frankly, aren't shining light these days. So to have the ability to once again come on and be able to the best of my ability at least, try to share my experience, strength, and hope with how I got to where I am today, I'm just very grateful for. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. We need to hear more stories like yours because the path to recovery and healing is complex and it's different for everybody. So I'm sure that hearing your story is going to help a lot of people and help a lot of people to think differently about their own potential path and maybe where the gaps lie, or maybe steps that they can take next for themselves or for their loved ones. And that's the goal of us being here. So yeah, really appreciate you openly sharing your story and some very personal details about your life.
Absolutely. Let's get to it. I'm ready.
What is the one truth about addiction that you wish someone had told you sooner?
I guess the best place to start is actually my mother. And I'll clarify, I am adopted. The people who adopted me is my mother and my father. So when I say the people who are my biological, they're my adopted versus the people who are my actual parents. And my mother would always tell me when I would come home drunk or something when I was like 16, 15, I'd be hugging a toilet or something. She'd be like, listen, there's something, maybe you got to watch out for this, but I didn't know what that meant yet. I didn't fully comprehend, what is alcoholism? What is the ism, more importantly, of alcoholism? The things that, I'm struggling with on a daily basis as a teenager. Feelings of inadequacy, feeling like I just can't tell the truth no matter how hard I want to. I just can't be, for some reason, I'm just incapable of doing what I need to be doing. So I guess in a roundabout way, something I wish somebody told me about addiction is that it'll come at you from any angle it can. And if you're not cursed with having it, then you're the lucky one. But for those who, are susceptible to this, doesn't discriminate based on race, ethnicity, income, nothing.
So when you're like 16 or 17, I'm making this assumption and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, but you feel like, oh, that happens to other people. I'm just partying and having fun, or I'm just, experimenting, or that's not me. Like, that's not going to happen to me. Is that kind of what you mean?
It wasn't even so much it wasn't going to happen to me. It was just that, I try to say it like this because people can understand it better, is I can't tell you when it stopped being a party and it became what I like to call a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because addiction is definitionally a lifestyle. It controls you. It dictates what your day is going to look like. If you have a schedule, no, you don't. Not any longer. It's making the schedule for you. But I don't know when it switched over from being a party to a lifestyle, but I remember when I got there and I looked around and went, oh shit, we're in it now.
And from the time that you got there, where you recognized, oh shit, we're in it now, to the time that you felt like you needed to do something to change it or you needed help, how long was that?
12 to 23. So 11 years.
Can you just tell me a little bit about what your childhood was like?
So my childhood is atypical of what a lot of people who would associate addiction with. I never wanted for anything. My father, though, did put things into place where I had to earn it. Like, he wanted to teach me the valuable lesson of, you put the effort in, you reap the reward from it. Right off the bat, I didn't like that. And I don't think any child likes to learn that lesson. But at least from what I've been told is I rebelled against the idea exceedingly hard. I was washed over from a very early age with a sense of entitlement. Like, I deserve this, and you're the whack job for not giving it to me. And how dare you tell me that I don't deserve it? So growing up, like I said, I was afforded every opportunity. If I had said, I want to be an astronaut, Dad, Mom, I want to, do that, they'd be like, okay, cool. Let's figure out how to get you into the, you probably have to go through the Air Force or something like that. If I wanted to go to college, my father's very against for university nowadays, and it's just got to say that. But, he would have put me through college, he put my brother through college. So I wasn't walking around wanting for things, that my needs weren't provided for. Like, I had all of that. My parents did divorce when I was 12. And it actually was around the same time where where I had that white light experience that a lot of people talk about when I met my good friend, when I met the bottle. I did experience the I am home moment. I got washed over with that. But I mean, 12, 13 years old is a very difficult, I mean, divorce is tough for any kid, but 12, 13, I feel like was specifically tough because I was old enough to see what was happening, but I wasn't old enough to process the nuances of it. And I internalized a lot of this, not so much even because the question inevitably gets asked, well, did you feel like it was your fault? No, I didn't feel like it was my fault. But once again, this was something happening to me. I was entitled to a good family. Like, this was the common thread throughout my entire childhood and early adulthood.
Is it still there?
By the grace of God, no. And the reason why I say it like that, and I don't mean to get preachy right off the bat, but my mode of operation is not to live a life that's unselfish. My mode of operation is, what's good for Aaron? How do I get it? Do I have to hurt somebody to get it? I don't care if I have to hurt. Like, it doesn't matter. That's my mode of operation. But if I'm able to take some action, I don't have to be beholden to that master any longer.
Mm-hmm. You've undergone a lot of transformation then. And part of it sounds like it's because you recognize some of your, I don't know if it's called character flaws. Is that
character defects?
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing I will say is, like, am I still prone? I want to clarify this because it made it sound like, oh, I'm just this perfect spiritual being now that like doesn't, I am flawed beyond words, and it can crop up in different ways, but I try to the best of my ability one day at a time to take out what I like to call insurance in my spiritual conditioning to like at least be able to notice it when it crops up and then whack it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, because you know yourself now better than perhaps you used to.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, let me just go back a little bit to your childhood. I get the entitled part, but like, what was your temperament like as a kid besides that? And the other part I'm wondering is like, who were you close to at home? Your mom, your dad?
So I was definitely closer with my mother. My mother passed away, sadly, before she saw me sober. So I got sober at 23, and she died when I was 21. And it was really, really bad. I mean, I'm not short for words a lot of the time, but to accurately describe how bad I was around that time and how much anyway, I was closer with my mother. God bless her. She was the great enabler, though. My father was you can't do that here. This is my house. Go get a job, dummy. Like, that was him. He said it in a nicer way and more eloquent. But my mother was the person that I was definitely codependently drunk upon. If she was upset, I was upset. If she was happy, I was happy. And that's kind of how we bounced off of each other. I mean, when my parents did divorce, it was, I'm staying with mom because dad has rules. That's how it was. But I was the wild child. My childhood was, I'm the wild child. I went to, God knows how, I think I went to 5 high schools in 4 years, something like that, and then finished an independent study through high school. I went to a wilderness treatment program before they got overhauled into not just like what like Netflix now calls the troubled teen industry and how gnarly that kind of got. Yeah. So I was in Utah in one of those programs.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're getting into a lot of trouble at school.
Yeah, I was getting into a lot of trouble at school. I was, like I said, living my life based on what do I need? How do I get it? Singular focus. Nobody else exists.
You mentioned that you were adopted. Who did you grow up with, like, in your household? There were 2 siblings or 1?
So the best way to kind of describe this is my father has been married 3 times. My brother is from my father in his first marriage. Mm-hmm. My older brother, David. My older sister, Anya, is from my mother in her first marriage. And then my parents were each other's second marriage, and they adopted me. And then when my father and mother divorced, my father married his current wife, Sue, my stepmother, love her to death. And she had 2 kids from a previous husband, spouse person. So we're very mixed. But as it pertains to me when I was younger growing up, my brother is 10 years older than me, and my sister's 16 years older than me.
Oh, wow. You were really the family baby.
Yes, I very much was. And my sister got kicked out of the house around that same time when I was born, because she was doing some of the stuff that I would later come to discover as my solution to get through life at the time. And my parents didn't want me to be around that, understandably, right? But my brother, being 10 years old when I was born, by the time I was 8, he was out of the house. So then I kind of became raised as an only child. Even if I take a postmortem on it and I look back now, I'm like, did that play a part in anything really? Not really, other than like, once again, it solidified this, like, it's like the me. It's all about me. That type of mentality that eventually could blossom, as we both know, into this like huge ego.
Got it. Okay. And what about your parents' dynamic at home? They eventually divorced. Was there a lead up to that in terms of their dynamic that you observed, or did that come out of the blue for you?
If it's like the fighting aspect, like, no, there was never any loud fighting. I never heard any loud screaming, things crashing around. Like, once again, like I said, like, I cannot point to a single thing in my childhood to be like, that's why I'm an alcoholic. That's why I like to do drugs. Like, I can't do that. But I did like notice some things that were weird, like my mother sleeping in a different room. And then before I even realized what was happening, like I found myself like sleeping in the side room, like on the floor, just because I like to be close to my mother. She was the person who I always felt at the time, at least what I perceived to be, really had my back. But I can look back as an adult now and be like, yeah, not so much.
Not so much in that her
She couldn't
Methods
lay
of
down the law.
parenting were
Like,
not effective with what you were contending with.
Yeah. No, she loved me to death, and nobody could take that away. She had her own demons as well, which manifested later in life.
Like what?
After my parents divorced, I think I'm about 18, 17 at the time. I'm not saying this to disparage her in any way. It's just, this is my story. And this is what had happened is, like I would be out and about, like she would be at home, Kettle One vodka, sleeping pills, Ambien specifically. And most things that people know about Ambien is like you sleepwalk, you sleep cook.
Oh, yeah.
You gotta hide your keys because you might sleep drive.
Yep.
And, I'd be out and I was engaging in very awful behavior, promiscuous behavior, 16, very young, 17. Like I'd be going to parties or whatever, and I'd come home and I'd be like, bring a girl with me. I'd like bring somebody with me. And we'd be sitting in the couch, and my father was living in this $3 million house in LA, but I chose to live with my mother in her 2-bedroom apartment. And we'd be there in like the living room, and I'd hear a bang like in the side. And I'm like, what's going on? And I would go into the other room, and she's not in her bed. She's not on the floor. I'm like, what's going on? And I would go into the bathroom, and she had no clothes on, and she had fallen into the shower face first, like off of the toilet.
Wow.
And I would pick her up, and I'd, put her clothes on, put her back to bed. And I go back to doing what I was doing like it was completely normal. And I look back at that now, I'm like, that's not normal.
No, it's not.
But once again, codependently drunk on my mother. But now that's morphed into, I need to take care of her. She needs me around. And this was like my first glimpse of like what I could come to understand now is like, was this me understanding my purpose?
How so?
So I firmly believe, this might get super philosophical, but I firmly believe that the reason why life exists is so that we find purpose. Like the meaning of life, the age-old question is, we need to find purpose. Humans need to find purpose. And if you don't find purpose, you become purposeless and you become rudderless. And then you start diverging into all these different avenues that 9 out of 10 times, 99.99% of times are not positive whatsoever. And we're seeing that manifest itself in slightly off topic, but in today's society where people like don't know what their role is. So they're seeking validation from different groups, whether it's online, whether it's in person, and it's now morphed into this. We've edged out the thing that has got society to this point, being God, and we've replaced it with things like activism. Like, I'm going to go to this rally and get the same amount of purpose from this community that I would have gotten to church 50 years ago. And I'm not a Christian, but that's just something I notice.
So when you say that you found your purpose as it relates to your mother, what do you feel like it was?
I felt like at the time, like I could look like doing a postmortem, hindsight's 2020, looking back and being like, until that point, I didn't really feel like I was just born to get drunk, get high, sleep with as many people as I could, and just be a glutton for entertainment and just lust and all these things. That was like, it cut through, like seeing my mother go through episodes like that, cut through some of the selfishness. And it was like in the thralls of addiction and all these different things. I was able to pump the brakes for a second and like help her. Now, did I have a chance? That doesn't matter. The point is that when I'm looking back now, it's like I had an opportunity to be of service in that moment and I didn't blink. That was something that was ingrained in me from the very beginning, was to help when I saw someone who needed help. And granted, it was my mother, with no clothes on, falling into a shower at 2 a.m. while I'm trying to hang out with somebody in the other room. But I don't think that can be overlooked as a pivotal moment. Now, did it lead to anything right afterwards? No, it didn't. I went right back to what I was doing. But that was like a moment that I could look back now. And I don't think I've ever shared that before publicly, of being like, hey, that was something that does lend evidence to, once again, my overall thesis that people need to have purpose.
Yeah. Well, it's a moment where you very naturally exercise kind of the opposite of what you describe as sort of core to your personality with the entitlement. You exercise very deep compassion. And it came at the time very naturally to you. Do you see that now in your day-to-day life?
My everyday life, I try to be of service when called upon. There's a phrase, when someone asks for help, I hope the hand of recovery is always there, and for that I'm responsible. It touches on one of the pillars of recovery, which is like, I can only keep what I have by giving it away. Once I've taken something that has benefited my life, I am now not asked, I am obligated to go out and try to give it back. And now some people say, oh, are you talking about, just drugs and alcohol? No, I'm talking about everything. If it's, somebody who needs to cross the street, which is like a cliche vision, I gotta do that. If there's, a single mother, real world example that happened, single mom looking like she had 4 kids around her. She was at the grocery store trying to reach something. She couldn't reach it. No, okay. Like, do I really need to run out of the grocery? No. Help her out real quick. It's just little things like that is in stark contrast to that ego-driven, the great I am the alpha and the omega of the universe that I used to live in and ruled my life back then, in conjunction with all these substances that I was intaking.
Yeah, and I think that sort of feeds the general mindset that you bring to every day in recovery. It's like, I'm here to serve a purpose, even if that purpose in that moment is to reach something that stranger can't reach. It's the idea that there are acts of kindness and extending yourself to show compassion, to show that, not showing necessarily to another person, but showing to them and also reminding yourself in that moment as well. There are other people all around you who have needs and you can help them.
And I'm no saint by like any means whatsoever. I'm still very much prey to a lot of the mindsets that I had before. But the difference is I don't live in it. I don't entertain it as if this is my reality permanently. What I've come to understand is that in addition to things being positive, things being negative, both of them are temporary. Very rarely are they permanent. And that's why I always tell people, it's like if you're on a program trying to fix your life, whether it be from drugs, alcohol, gambling, pornography, whatever it is, toxic relationships, whenever you're feeling good, that's when we need to double down our efforts. Because when shit hits the fan, and believe me, it does, you don't have the energy to work in that moment. And you need to rely on the recovery insurance I was talking about earlier to get you through that downswing.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was about your parents' values, like your dad's values. I feel like you've touched on a little bit of this as far as earning things yourself and also setting boundaries. But if you had to kind of summarize, like, what do you think of as his core values and how did those play into sort of the way that he raised you?
Honesty, immediately. Honesty. That was always his thing. He said, Aaron, and it was so funny because I remember later in life, he'd be like, you've never lied to me. And I'm like, I've lied to you a bunch. But that was always his thing. I mean, I remember a time I was in middle school and I had bought weed from a classmate and like an idiot, I went around showing people. And then I got inevitably, the cops called. My mom was sitting out front and I was like, this is weird. So she's there. The cops show up. My dad shows up and he goes up, he takes me out back and goes, Aaron, you gotta tell me the truth. You've never lied to me. What actually happened? Did the kid who they knew it was, did this kid sell it to you? And I'll never forget that moment because like that was another thing that like I felt and I actually did confess to him in that moment. I was like, yep, I ratted the kid out. Ratted the kid out. Got detention the rest of the school year and we moved on. But his core value above all else was honesty. Because without honesty, another thing that he always says, and I'm sure anybody listening to this who knows my father, he's very big on clarity. Clarity to disagree, all these different things, clarity. But you can only achieve clarity if both parties are being honest.
Right.
It's the only way. Same thing with recovery. I have to be honest about what is going on inside of me. If I am not, I am doomed to fail. If I'm not honestly willing to pump the brakes, if I'm not honestly willing to send out the spiritual bat signal, if you will, a popular recovery program says we came to believe in a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. That doesn't mean immediately that I have to believe it. It just means I have to crack the door to the possibility. And that requires an epic level of honesty within yourself to realize that I am so effed right now in this moment that I need to send out the spiritual bat signal to anyone and anything that can help un-F me.
But that level of honesty also requires a degree of insight into oneself, right? Because like you could describe it as denial or you could just describe it as a lack of insight, but it takes different people, different things to get to that place where they can honestly look inside themselves and see their own flaws, where they are versus where they want to be. When did that come to you, that capacity to be honest?
I firmly believe that people don't change. Whatever aspect of their life is going on, people do not change unless their circumstances become painful enough or their circumstances are so unregulated from where they want it to be that it's so in their face. And so for me, I was able to admit that my life was completely off the rails. Like the analogy I like to give is my life walking into a treatment center was a car coming across the finish line. The engine's on fire. There's no hood. The doors have been gone since the car was, 8 years old, and I'm barely hanging, and the car is about to explode. That was where I was at. And so, I mean, I was given the gift of, as they call it, desperation, of like just something come and relieve me of like how I'm feeling right now because I want to kill myself, and which I've attempted 3 times. By the grace of God, I've learned that I suck at killing myself. It's kind of dark, but it's funny. But I only come to a place of being able to be honest with myself if I'm putting in work. It's not just like the switch gets flipped and all of a sudden my mode of operation has been completely reprogrammed and now I'm just living this life of like, yeah, you know what, I could be honest with people because I'm still screwed up inside. So it takes a long time. And the short version of answering your question is it takes time. It takes a long time and it takes action. And that action could look different for different people.
And it sounds like you're describing rock bottom, at least in addiction, right? Like that people have to get to a point where their life has become so unmanageable and so deeply destroyed by their addiction before they're able to look inside themselves and say, here's what I need. I can't live like this anymore. Do you feel like that's for most people, for everyone? Was that just for you?
Well, everybody's rock bottom looks different. And I'm talking anything. It's not just addiction. It's not just a substance use disorders. Once again, it could be anything. Some people don't lose the car. Some people don't lose the wife and kids. Some people don't have the restraining order. Some people don't have the DUI. Some people don't have the gambling debt. Some people do. A phenomenal story that I want to share with you real quick. I checked out a program, realized I wasn't a candidate for it necessarily, but it was called Adult Children of Alcoholics. And Adult Children of Alcoholics, I walked into that meeting and I was like, you know what? I'm going to share about my parents' divorce and how badly it screwed me up. But before I got the opportunity to share, a lady shared about how her father had sexually abused her for years. And it was like, well, I'm not going to share about my parents having a bad divorce because that doesn't compare, right? So back when I smoked cigarettes after the meeting, I'm having a cigarette. And the lady walks up to me. She goes, oh, I saw you raise your hand like you're new. Why didn't you want to share anything? And I said, well, quite frankly, after hearing what you're sharing, what your father did to you, I didn't feel like mine applies really, like how bad could my stuff have been? And she said something to me that changed my life. She said, you could have processed your parents' divorce worse than I processed my father abusing me. And it was at that moment I realized that everybody is different when it comes to processing trauma, when it comes to what their addiction could look like. Meanwhile, I'm in a different program for alcohol. But, in that moment, it was like, oh my God, what just happened? And it gave me a new lens to look at life, where it's like, to answer your question, do people have to hit rock bottom? I would argue yes, but people could hit rock bottom multiple times over their life, and it could look always different. And it doesn't have to be some catastrophic event that takes place to just elicit the willingness to change. If I'm sitting here and going, hey, I need to do something with my life, sometimes that's enough. I don't need to get a DUI. I don't need to be put in handcuffs. I don't need to go take a state-funded sabbatical, to the California penal system. All sometimes I need to do is realize, hey, you know what? Like, wow, like I lost that job. I gotta look at my behavior. What's going on with me right now? And sometimes that's enough.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to talk a little bit about what I think I've heard you speak about meeting your biological mother and what you learned about her. But I want to rewind before that to when you found out that you were adopted. Is that something you always knew from an early age, or was
as far as my memory takes me, I always knew I was adopted. My parents never kept it from me.
Okay. And how did you think about that? What did that mean to you, if anything?
Well, it never really meant anything because my father was very consistent about this. He said, Aaron, blood doesn't mean anything. Doesn't matter. He said, his direct quote was, I was there the day your brother was born. I was there the day you were born. There's no difference. That's what his philosophy's always been. And he gets more defensive of it than I actually do. I'm like, sure, okay, I'm adopted, whatever. Like, I share his same values. I don't share his blood, but, aside from some genetic markers that, could take place, we're the same. We're exactly the same. So much so that my wife actually criticizes me. She's like, you're turning into your father. I'm like, please don't say that. It's good and it's bad. They never had it from me, no. It was, did I look at other people and go, oh, I wonder what it's like to, sure. But it was never something I dwelled on. Honestly. I had a therapist when I'm in my rehab center who was adamant that all of my problems were because I was adopted. And I was just like, I humored her. I did the work that she required me of doing. And we both came to the conclusion that there was nothing there.
There's nothing under that rock.
Nothing. No.
Okay. It strikes me that that's largely because of the way that it was presented to you. And going back to your dad's value of honesty, he was honest with you from day one. And he spoke with you openly about what he felt that meant or didn't mean. Mm-hmm. And
I think it's important to clarify this too, because when I'd be up for 4 or 5 days, on crystal meth or something like that, I would have a thought crop in my head of my dad loves my brother more than me. But that's a fallacy. That's addiction talking. That's the drugs talking. That's not reality. And I think I shared that when I did a fireside chat with him, because he just asked me that point blank, that question of, hey, do you think I loved your brother more than you? And I was like, when I told him, I was like, yeah, addiction sometimes, but was it a source of my problems? No.
Why was he asking you that? Was he asking you that from the perspective of because you had problems that your brother didn't and you had addiction and you were more difficult in certain ways, for example, to raise? Or was it in relation to, do you think I loved your brother more than you because you were adopted and he wasn't?
I don't know the reason, but I can guess why he did. And most of the stuff that my father does, and it's kind of the same thing that I do, is I try to bring clarity to people who might be going through something similar. Mm-hmm. And that's a big question a lot of people get is well, because I've adopted my kid, if he has these problems, is he going to blame me for not being as well? But it sounds so stupid when you say that. Think about me. I am adopted. My biological mother, not to jump ahead too far, but my biological mother liked the same drugs that I did. I found that out later in life. Meanwhile, I could have been living in a trailer, or I could have been living in a $3 million house in Los Angeles, having the luxury problem of thinking that, oh, I deserve that new pack of Pokemon cards. My dad won't buy it for me. I hate him. I lived that life when I could have been over here. Mm-hmm. So who am I to complain?
Right. Well, you're approaching it from a standpoint of gratitude.
Well, that's key.
For what you have.
That's the corner. Recovery is impossible without gratitude. Victimhood mentality is the opposite of living in gratitude, and it is incongruent with a spiritual lifestyle. Period. End of story. Full stop.
Not to go too much off topic and bounce around, but that reminds me of a video I saw your dad in very recently where he spoke about his illness, and he spoke about how he never assumed that he was going to be a person who was going to be free from illness. He appreciated the life that he had before that, but he never assumed that it was forever. And it sounded like he was saying in some ways that he expected that someday he was going to be, not in this specific situation, no one could predict,
but he could always be the one.
And this sounds like it's very much tied to the values. It's like the values are honesty, earning what you keep, and approaching life with gratitude. And I'm wondering how that is reflected in the way your entire family is coping with his illness right now. Maybe you could say a little bit about what happened to him, just because I'm not sure.
Yeah, so about a year ago, I mean, what is it? November 12th, day before my birthday, last year, my father was coming out of the shower, and he's a big guy, 6'4", 260, and slipped on the tile and went straight back and hit his neck on they have this god ugly standing tub. My stepmother's gonna hit me for saying that. And he fell back, and C-spine injury. Fell right on his neck, and he's been paralyzed from the injury site down since. Although we have been having some good developments recently where when I went to go see him, he can move his hand like that, which they were like, wow, I can't believe this is happening right now. A guy of his age, late 70s. I don't know my dad's actual age. This is bad. It's escaping me right now. Able to do this, after that. And he has some, like, you could pinprick like some. So the family coping with this is, it's hard to not bring people closer because everybody's trying to work in tandem. Everybody's trying to work together, and one of the things too is like, I had to understand my role in this. And I know that I am still prone to absolutely blowing a gasket and saying the most awful stuff to somebody because I'm living in my emotion at the moment. So sometimes the best thing I can do is I'll just tell my brother, Dave, don't tell me what's happening right now. I don't want to know, because I'm going to go scream at somebody. Interjecting an angry Aaron or an unregulated Aaron into a situation, there's no way it's going to make it better. Impossible. Never going to happen. But then on the flip side of it, part of my living amends to my father was when I made my amends to him and took accountability, because there's a difference between amends and saying you're sorry. Sorry is, hey, I'm sorry for this. Amends is, this is what I did. How do I make it better? Then you shut up and you let them talk. And my father, I did that. He said, part of what I need you to do is be there when called upon. And I can't think of a better, moment when God has like hit me over the head with a mallet than this, where it's like, Aaron, be there when called upon. Like, I have the luxury that I understand a lot of people don't have. I can drop things and move things around to go do stuff, even though I do have an 11-month-old baby girl. My wife is she's amazing. But I got to go, like, they needed help. I flew to where he was in his hospital, and I spent, like 5 days with him. And I was there, took care of him, was able to do that. But that's what it's about. Once again, I have to be willing to live by the things on a daily basis that I've learned, lest I regress back into an unspiritual lifestyle that immediately, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but, at least in my experience, will immediately lead me down to the needle, down to the bottle, down to the powder.
Yeah, so this is all wrapped into your faith, which I do want to spend some time talking about. Before I move on to that, though, I want to come back to this theme of your adoption and your adoptive parents. Why did your parents adopt you versus having your siblings?
So I was Plan C. It's actually a funny story. Mm-hmm. I call myself tongue-in-cheek Plan C. You have to have a dark sense of humor if you're in recovery. Otherwise, if you take yourself too seriously, you're absolutely screwed. So I was Plan C. My mother and father, like I said, each other's second marriage. They tried to get pregnant. Mother had a miscarriage, couldn't have kids anymore. Then they went to an adoption agency, and there was a woman who was in prison. She was pregnant, and they were like, okay, we're going to pay your medical bills. We're going to do this, all this stuff. And she got released before the baby was due. And she ended up getting on drugs. And my parents, they're going to love this. They said, well, we don't want to risk a kid having drug problems. So we're going to not proceed with this adoption. And then the adoption agency called and said, hey, well, we have a mother who's actually past due right now. And they're like, we'll take it. And that was me. Of all the places that I could have ended up, to end up where I am, and my whole life culminating to sitting in this chair right now, the odds of it happening, you cannot calculate. And, not to get, once again, preachy about it, but it makes more sense to believe in anything than in nothing, in my opinion. And I'm a logical guy.
There are so many reasons why it is some kind of miracle that you're here. Not even just in that chair, but here at all.
Like I said, I'm really bad at killing myself.
Apparently. Apparently. So was there a point at which, coming back to the adoption theme, you were curious about, like, you had to know your biological parents, or was that not a thing for you?
Once again, Interesting story. Back when I had Facebook, I had been friends with this person named Jordan, this girl, and we'd been friends. I probably just accepted it. I don't know, out of nowhere. And we've been friends for like a while on Facebook. Never talked, never anything like that. And then one day I got a message out of the blue. Said, hey, was your mother's name so-and-so? Your biological mother. And I was like, wait, so this person knows I'm adopted first off, and they know the name.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here? Turns out a few messages later, I find out this is my biological half-sister.
Wow.
And she had found my name because she still talked to our biological mother, which she stayed with. She was born 2 years after I was. My birth mother was 16 when I was born. So she was 18 when Jordan was born. And I was never obsessed with finding out. I just knew who this person was. But once this message hit, I'm like, I have to know. And keep in mind, this took place at a pivotal time. One could argue the worst time for me. I got sober June 4th, 2016. This happened after I left a treatment center here in Los Angeles in December 2015. This happened in April. So I'm like, I got to figure this out. And in a way, it's like, you look at the timing and I'm like, once again, I see you. I go, and she lived in Portland. And I was living in LA at the time, took a cheap flight, went up there, drank the whole plane ride, drank the whole time at the hotel. Then I meet her. She wasn't 21 yet. I take myself out drinking with her accompanying me, basically, and made myself completely act like an idiot. And then the next weekend at that trip, she had put me in contact with my biological mother. Her name's Jamie. Put us in contact. So the next weekend, this time, because I just paid for a flight and now I'm broke, I'm going to call my dad to have him pay for a flight to go meet my biological mother. After like not talking to him at all for like God knows how long. I only hit him up when I needed something from him. Once again, selfish. So I fly up to meet her. And I think I'm going to like stay at a hotel or whatever. This is in like the boonies of Washington State. So I fly in and she picks me up. Find out I have another little half sister. And we're driving back. And I'm like, okay, I'll find a hotel. I'll find a motel or whatever. And I'm realizing we're like increasingly getting away from civilization. I'm like, what is happening here? And so we're driving, we're going. And she looks back and she says, do you want to stop at the liquor store? And I'm like, I'm home. This is awesome. My parents have never asked me to stop at the liquor store, ever. So I'm like, okay, let's do it. So we go, get whatever we need. We go back to what I now realize is in the middle of nowhere, a trailer. And the long story short is I find out that she likes to smoke meth, something that I also really love to do. And once again, I had another moment. I am home. I have arrived, shirking and discarding everything that I had here in LA because guess what? I'm with somebody who drank and smoked meth the same way that I drank and smoked meth. Granted, I was shooting meth though at the time too, but a pipe will do. And funny enough too, another pivotal thing happened in that moment because it kind of relates to like, oh, the adoption or whatever, but it's also the psychosis that gets induced from the substances I was using. Is we go out to a bar and she was with this big dude, this big like angry biker looking guy. And granted, I'm wearing like skinny jeans and a band t-shirt and I weighed probably 95, 96 pounds at the time. And I got shoulder checked by this like redneck dude at a bar. And the guy who was with my biological mother, he came over and defended me.
Thank God for that.
Thank God for that. But it was the way I interpreted it once again was, when did my dad ever do this for me? Discounting, he's given me everything I needed, provided safety, big house, got to go to the White House, met Bush, spent time in DC, doing all these things. And it's like never wanting for anything that I didn't have to earn. But I feel more at home getting shoulder checked by some biker, some random dude who I met 3 hours ago, having my back while I'm on crystal meth with my biological birth mother in a state that I don't know where it is. And I say that to just illustrate to your audience that if there are family members out there being like, why does my child perceive things like this? First off, stop trying to understand it. It's cartoon land on crack. Like you're not going to get it. And you might be supposed to speak in English, but you might as well be speaking Swahili while they're trying to communicate how they're feeling. Like you're going to miss each other.
Yeah. Well, it's the addiction talking. It's the effects of the drugs talking. And I don't know if you've felt like you were literally psychotic, but methamphetamine is known to induce psychosis. So it does throw people out of touch with reality.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So, and there's like different alternate realities you can talk about. It could be like you're distorting your past, which is something someone sober could do too, right? But then there's also like you literally think that you're God, or you become super paranoid or fearful, or, you know, you got all your windows blocked off and you feel like, you know, people are after you.
Power drilling your walk-in closet closed with a bucket and spending the next 2 weeks in there.
Yeah. Sound familiar?
Yes, it does.
Well, that was one of my questions for you, was that did stimulants, was it methamphetamine? Was that sort of your stimulant of choice when you were using stimulants, or did you use cocaine as well, or crack? Or...
So I went Adderall, coke, meth. That was my progression, because I like to tell people I had a master's degree in alcoholism and a bachelor's degree in meth. if you put every drug on the planet in front of me and say you have to choose one, I will choose a bottle of Jack Daniels. Towards the end, it was a little too expensive for me, but pop off, or I don't know, whatever it is now. But no, I would choose alcohol over any other substance on the planet. I had to have it at all costs. You're in my way, I'm coming through you.
So alcohol first, but then the stimulants followed.
Yeah, stimulants followed because I also realized that, I'm sure anybody who's been down this path can guess what I'm about to say is I realized that the more I drank, I would hit a threshold where it's like, I'm going to fall asleep. And if I fall asleep, I wake up in alcohol withdrawal. So I need to, but at the beginning, I just wanted to party harder. When I was a teen, I just wanted to party harder. So, you got little 10 milligram, instant release Adderalls. Like, how much? $1. Okay, cool. Let me get 5, then you next thing you know, you're popping them, then you're snorting them. Then you're like, then the sun comes up and you're like, this is never going to end, and then it's like, well, you never want it to end. And it's for somebody like me, okay, if it's just Friday, then it's Friday and Saturday, then it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then it's at school, then I'm kicked out of school, then I'm an independent study. Cool, I only see a teacher once a week. Let's do it every day. But I remember the first time I ever saw my hand shaking, I was like, this isn't happening. It was pure denial. I'm like, because I knew what it was. I'd seen enough movies. I remember waking up and it was like a tremor.
How old were you when that happened?
It was before my mom died. I remember that. So I'd say probably my hand started shaking late 19, early 20.
That's young.
Yeah. But I mean, I had drank a lot. I had drank anytime I got my hands on. But I remember I used to drink stuff like when I was younger, it was like, Four Locos, we're going to party, beer pong, whatever. But it was like, okay, well, beer's expensive now. And now I'm actually required to do things with my life. So what's the quickest avenue to get as much alcohol in my system in the shortest amount of time? Okay, well, liquor, that's expensive. I like Jack Daniels because or Scotch, because if I'm drinking Scotch, I'm not an alcoholic. And then it quickly turned into me going to Chinatown here in Los Angeles and stocking up on $3 pints of 70% alcohol rice vodka. That's what I would drink for the most part. You'd be on that for like a little bit, your hand gonna start shaking too. But it was like I would mask it by, no one's gonna question if I'm drinking a bottle of Gatorade. So you get a bottle of Gatorade, you pour half of it out, you fill the rest up with vodka, you shake it up, and I make 3 of those a day. And I'll just keep going. And that was, Aaron, well, you really like Gatorade? Oh, man, I love Gatorade. I'm an athlete.
Now, that's interesting about the alcohol and stimulants, and that your biological mother shared the same overlapping addictions. Yeah. I mean, the risk factors for stimulant addiction, which it sounds like you had addiction to both of them.
Yeah.
Stimulant addiction, I mean, there are many, but one is being male. You got that.
There's a correlation between being male and stimulant addiction?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Another risk factor is psychiatric problems. And you mentioned Adderall. ADHD is one of them, but I don't know if you actually were ever prescribed Adderall or you just taking it recreationally.
I mean, I was never prescribed Adderall. No.
Okay. But it could be other psychiatric. So depression, anxiety. I've heard you talk about anxiety, but is depression something that you've
that's the thing is, I mean, I have no problem saying this. I'm unmedicated now. But if I ever got into a place with my depression, because like I go through, I like to call them depressive downswings, where it's like, but I can recognize when it's happening. It's almost like I feel the hair on the back of my neck go up and then down, and I almost feel like my blood pressure drops a little bit. And that's like in like a day later, I'll catch myself being like, wow, I'm not finding the joy. Like everything just seems darker, and I feel dread. But it's manageable now. And by no means am I recommending anything. I'm not a doctor. Talk to your own mental health professional. But at least in my experience, what I've realized is like, if I have the clarity to realize I could communicate it to my wife, like, and she'll even notice now, she's like, babe, are you all right? I just hit a downswing for a second. Now they're fewer and far between. They used to happen like in early recovery. It was all the time. But I remembered being on meds when I was younger. And I was like, I do not want to be a robot. Let me try other things before I try this. I'm never shutting the door on it. But if I can get by without it, let me at least try. Because I've never done that before. To be actually sober and try to navigate that world.
Yeah. I mean, people really vary in their sort of preferences and their values and their beliefs around medication. Like some people are like, oh, there's a pill for that. Like, please, if it works and I don't feel depressed and it's not addictive, I want to take it. And then there's some people who I think more like you would really like to go at it on your own and try to sort of discover the internal resources that you can use and rely upon and see if they work. And, you know, the good thing is that you have the openness to, if this doesn't work, I'm not going to be rigid about this if this doesn't work and I really need the help. But if I can manage it with kind of coping strategies and good kind of self-insight, then that's the preference. And that's totally reasonable.
I think
it sounds like it's working.
Yeah, I mean, some people too, just if anybody's listening to this who's like, you know, dealing with maybe the stigma aspect of it, it's like stop. Like, to the best of your ability, just try to, like, it's like, this is your life. Like, who cares? Like, this is your life. Like, and it's crazy because, especially with like people in recovery, like I remember early on, I was so concerned about what everybody else was thinking about, because left to my own devices, I think that I'm the most important person. I think that when I leave a room, people are like, no, they're talking about me. Like, they're talking about, that was always the thing. I'm like, I would constantly think that people were talking negative about me. And then somebody, like some plumber from a recovery room, like basically like verbally slapped me upside the head. And they're like, you're not that important, dude. People have their own stuff to deal with. Like, nobody's like, you didn't go to an interaction. People are like, I got to talk about this guy now. It's like, that doesn't happen. And I deal with that. My wife, who's not an addict, I mean, she does that too. She's like, she's prey to that stuff. And I feel like a lot of people are, but like,
yeah. Well, I mean, in some sense, you're describing social anxiety, which I know you've spoken about experiencing, and that being the driving force towards alcohol in your early days. One of them. Okay. So I want to know more about that. But that's the funny thing about social anxiety, is that when you have it, you overestimate the extent to which people are concerned with what you're doing, paying attention to every little thing you do or what you say and how you say it. It's just, you have this sort of heightened sensitivity that leads you to sort of make a cognitive misstep where you're just overestimating it. You're like, oh, they're watching me, they're paying attention. People are into themselves. So, they're generally more concerned with themselves and how they're acting and how they're coming across than how you, Aaron, or anybody else is coming across. But that's the sort of cognitive error that people often have to correct and work towards correcting in therapy, is like, well, I did this thing and I'm really embarrassed about, or I'm worried about how I'm going to be perceived for it, but have to remind myself that people aren't paying as close attention to me as I think they are, and just get over it. I mean, that's an oversimplification, but that's a lot of what therapy for social anxiety is.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there. They tried some stuff like that, and like I said, I don't knock therapy at all. I know a lot of people, and then that's another thing too. I don't shut the door to it. My wife has sometimes said to me, "Listen, Aaron, like, maybe you should go see somebody, talk to a mental health professional."
Mm-hmm.
And I think for some reason, I don't know why. This is one of the things I don't know why. I don't know why I'm more stubborn against that than I am with the idea of like keeping the door open for medications. But I know, granted, you got to go see one to get the other. But for some reason, I'm a little bit more resistant to going to see a therapist now than I am other things for some reason. Not to say I never would, but I that's the one where if I'm confronted with like, this is clearly going to help you, I will to this day be like, let me just try this on my own.
Maybe you just like to find your own way.
Yeah, I think so. One person has, theorized that, you're taking control back. And I'm like, well, then I've been taking control back from the very beginning. I don't think it's necessarily that. I'll say it like this. I'm now addicted, in a positive way, I'm addicted to trying to advance the understanding of who I am, because if I can have clarity into who I am, then I have a better understanding of where my strengths are and where my weaknesses are. And once I can define that, I'm able to pursue pathways to benefit my wife, benefit my child, benefit my recovery, and help other people. So that's, I think, why like I resist potentially. I'm kind of working this through for the first time right now on camera with you, that I've never like really did a deep dive into this myself, to being resistant to that. And what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's an appropriate way? Or I know that you're doing the interview here, but I got a question for you on that.
Do I think it's appropriate that you resist other people dictating the way that you find your way?
No, not people, mental health professionals specifically.
One thing that I've learned from treating a lot of people for a lot of different problems, whether it be anxiety or addiction or OCD or depression, is that people respond to very different things. Like, there is not a canned approach to, oh, you have depression? Let me open this book and I'm going to teach you these 10 things, and then you're going to like come out the other side and be just fine, right? The same with addiction, same with anxiety. So what people need to find that kind of deeper understanding of themselves and that motivation to sort of move forward from it, and also the insight that leads them to just a different way of relating to themselves and to the world, what each person needs is different. And what you're saying is that you resist someone else, and maybe particularly someone in the mental health profession, being the force behind bringing you to that place.
Potentially, like you said, we'll get into it in a little bit. I mean, I've established a very personalized connection with a God of my understanding that has not let me down yet. So maybe that's the answer. Maybe the answer is, if I seek help from a mental health professional, potentially it feels like a betrayal. Or I'm being like finally realizing a limitation.
That could be it. I mean, you're very invested and not invested for shallow reasons. Like you're very invested in working this out through God. Or like everybody has a different higher power, but like I'm assuming it's God.
Yeah. God, go to early direction, group of drunks, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
All right, God. So you're very invested in working this out through your relationship with God. And that's working for you right now. And so A, you don't want to stray from that and distract yourself with something else. And B, maybe you want to remain faithful to
possibly
this path and to God and to yourself. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be to another person or being either. Like maybe you're faithful to yourself. Everybody needs something different in life to guide them. So there's not like one way to recover from suffering or to learn to cope with suffering. And what you're describing with your dad, I don't know if your dad's in therapy or not, and I'm not asking you that, but he's doing a lot of this work through his faith, through his relationship with God, and through his life outlook that has probably developed over years of contending with life, God, suffering, and family.
Yeah. When he spoke about his injury, he said he feels like he was uniquely prepared to be able to deal with this because he never thought that he wasn't going to be the one. Kind of like we were talking about earlier. He's like, most people go through life and say, oh, people, become paralyzed, people get into car accidents, people die young, but it's not going to happen to me. Like he never had that mindset. And plus the work that he had done on gratitude through his entire life has been able to, in his religious, affiliations and his deep understanding of, the New Testament as well as the Torah, he's able to not fall prey to a lot of the self misery and whatnot. And one could arguably say it's the easiest to fall into a position like that when you are paralyzed from the neck down. So kudos to him for that.
Yeah, it's really amazing, actually. I feel like there are so many people suffering with pain and medical conditions and a lot of health struggles that leave people hopeless. And I think we can all learn from his outlook and his approach. And hopefully it's helping inform your approach to your life and your little 11-month-old daughter who you're raising.
I mention her whenever I can. I don't know if you can tell, but just whenever I get the opportunity to be like, I have an 11-month-old daughter, I'm going to say I have an 11-month-old daughter because she's the most perfect thing that I've ever done with my entire life. Not even close.
Okay, so let's talk about her.
Let's go.
Did you find your now wife while you're in recovery?
Yes.
Or did you know her when you were using?
Recovery. Yeah. When I went to treatment across the country in Pennsylvania. I went to a great facility. It's called Caron Foundation. And we ended up meeting a few years later. And a funny thing, I met her right after, because like I said, early recovery, there's nothing I can't turn into crystal meth and booze. So I turned dating apps into just a playground of degeneracy. And I had gone through relationship after relationship. It was very easy to recognize the pattern. Meet 3 months later, break up. Meet 3 months later, break up. What is the common thread here? Because finally I'm like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. And I am about to pull my hair out. And this is around the same time where another component ended up happening. I got an actual fellowship outside of just the recovery rooms. I started hanging out with people in recovery and doing things, playing airsoft, working on cars, go-karting, whatever, smoking cigars. Around that time too, and it was like kind of a missing piece in my recovery. You'll see where I'm going with this, is like when I got into recovery, my day really looked like, for the first few years at least, was wake up, go to work, go to a meeting, go to bed. And that was it. And I would see like somebody who I met on an app or whatever on the weekend. But I was like, okay, stuff is changing. I need to capitalize on this. I'm going to flip the script of my type on its head, see where that leads. First person I met was not my wife.
Okay, so who were you drawn to before that? These 3-month relationships, like what were you looking for and what was that type?
I was very much drawn to like the chaos. I was like, the more chaotic, the better. I want somebody who I can like basically get high on myself through our relationship. And the downside is that once again, you get back to that like codependently drunk on one another that I like was with my mother, where if they're happy, I'm happy. If they're angry, I'm angry. And 80% of the time, we're mad at each other and we're screaming at each other, but we're feeling something. And it's so toxic. If anybody is listening to this who's in a relationship like that, get out now. Run, flip it on its head, you'll find your spouse. Not guaranteed, don't hold me to that. But that's at least my story, was I flipped it on its head and I was like, I found somebody, looked the same, but she had a job. She had responsibilities to some degree. She would argue that she was a little more reckless than, but I knew what reckless was. And I'm like, she ain't reckless. Like she might be reckless by like some like normie society standard,
Right.
But to Aaron's standard, this was completely different. And I let my guard down too.
Yeah. Okay. So what made that possible?
At the time, I didn't know. What I've come to understand too is I don't know it for a fact, but I have a high degree of suspicion this was God working in my life. And what I mean by that is giving me these moments where it was like, Aaron, you are not doing what you are supposed to be doing. You have now evidence multiple times to suggest that you are not being a good person. You are once again using people, but now you're just sober, but you're now using them for other self-gratifying aspects, and you need to stop and you need to change. And I also, once again, that's why I brought up the fact I started hanging out with guys, men in recovery. And I saw what healthy relationships looked like for the first time. I saw people being able to go to work. They were living together, our two best friends, Danny and Diana. They would go to work, they lived together in an apartment, split the rent, fought like a normal couple sometimes, but they didn't do it in front of other people. They kept it private, and they had a relationship. And going all the way back to my father, with my mother, never saw them fight, but there was obviously complications there. And then when I get older and I see my father with Sue, his third wife, they never fight, period, never. And I'm like, y'all are full of crap. There's no way you don't fight. And I had a resentment against them for that. I'm like, you guys are not being real. You guys are lying to everybody. This is a facade. Little did I know that I was the one who actually just didn't understand that this could exist. And a funny thing happens, and this is like just applicable to everybody. It's amazing what happens when you crack the door on possibility and you take a chance for a second, what can end up happening. So
did you guys plan the kind of stage of life and marriage? How long have you been married? Like when you wanted to have a baby?
Yeah. So my wife and I, we got together, I think December 2018. We moved in, ready for this? March 1st or something around there, 2020. What happened in March of 2020? The entire globe shut down.
Yep.
So we went from living our separate lives to living in a studio apartment together in lockdown.
Oh, that's a real test of a relationship.
Yes, it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we thrived through that, though. I will say we were both technically essential workers. She worked remote anyway. And at the time, I worked in the mental health profession. So I was considered an essential worker as well. So neither of us lost our jobs. We moved in together. Her student loans were on hold. So we were paying down that. We were crushing it. We were also like getting to know each other, what living together was like in a studio apartment during at the time, back in March, it was like, is this a flesh-eating virus? Like, we don't know what this is. Like, is this World War Z? Like, what's going on here? Quickly we realized it wasn't, but that's neither here nor there. And we got to know each other. And we flourished through this. And then we got married, and my daughter, 11 months, about 2 years after that, got pregnant.
What's it like being a dad?
I'm surprised by how unsurprising it is. It's hard to describe the feeling that you get, and parents know what I'm talking about when you first see your child born. People say you have moments like when you die, your life flashes before your eyes. My life flashed before my eyes when I saw my daughter. It's the one thing that like really wells me up. Like I said before, she's the most perfect thing I've ever done with my entire life. And I say it's unsurprising because once your child is there, like I tend to overcomplicate things from what I've heard from other parents, like first timers. They're like, well, what do I do? Do I do this? I'm like, well, you don't have a choice. Either not to be dark, but it's like, and I said this to my wife because she was going through hormones and all this stuff after the baby's born. And I just said to her, I'm like, my love, one of two things is going to happen. The baby's going to die or she's going to survive. And I don't think we're going to let the first one happen. We're going to be okay. And I've taken this approach to so many different things in life is like, for instance, every time I do a podcast, whether it's on my show on American Recovery for PragerU, or it's coming here today, I get nervous. I have a pit in my stomach every time the camera turns on. And I've been doing this for about 2 years now. Still happens. And it'll probably happen for a while. But I understand, short of me getting in my car and leaving, I have to go through this. There's no way around it. I've committed to this, and I like to keep my commitments. So I have to persevere and go forwards. And it's the same thing with being a young father. My 11 months of being a father have taught me that no matter what happens, chances are, as long as I'm leaning on something greater than myself, if that is at the forefront, if that is above all else, I am not going to fail. Nothing in my life since I've gotten sober has gone the wrong way. It just hasn't. Maybe you could chalk that up to perception or, manifestation or what people want to call it these days. I simply go, you know what? I'm doing the thing. I'm doing the thing. I'm saying my prayers. I'm talking, prayers talking, meditation is listening. Simple as that. Don't overcomplicate it. Talk, listen, call it a day. And if I'm able to just follow some certain things throughout the day, life gets a lot easier. My baby crying doesn't seem that crazy. My baby waking up, at 3 a.m. doesn't seem that crazy. Guess what? It's a blessing that I have a baby crying and driving me nuts at 3 a.m. If I'm able to live in that mindset, life is good. I don't got any problems if I can live in that mindset. Now, do I do it every day? Absolutely not. I'm not perfect.
Well, you're human. So
Yeah.
By definition, you're not perfect.
Yeah.
But once again, your sort of driving theme is connection with God, gratitude. And that also is like leading you to a form of optimism about things. Not to oversimplify, like, oh, half full or half empty, but honestly, like, that's kind of what it is. Like, the baby's crying at 3 a.m. There are going to be times when that's just rough because it's just hard to get up and you're exhausted. And it's like, again, but the driving theme of, I'm so lucky to be a dad. I'm so lucky to have this little beautiful baby. And so
almost less than 10 years ago, I weighed 95 pounds and was, so like I had track marks and I was a mess. My liver was shutting down. I had nothing. My father said, I know what you're doing. Don't come around my family. He hit me with that one. My family, like excluding me almost. I did it on purpose, but it was, something I could look back on and be like, damn, he was right. He needed to. He needed to protect his family from the insanity that was me. And yes, I get to be a father today. I get to do these things. I'm allowed to, by the grace of God, to do these things today.
Yeah. It's a privilege and an honor. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, what's the most challenging part of parenthood?
The most challenging part? Fear.
Yeah. What are you afraid of?
I am responsible for something that cannot take care of itself. Mm-hmm. What if I make the wrong decision? That is the toughest part that I face right now, is I am going to screw this beautiful, perfect creature up. And it sounds cliche. It might sound stupid. Viewers might be rolling their eyes right now, but I'll tell you this. In my heart of hearts, that is the deepest fear that I have nowadays. Not that I'm going to relapse. It's always a possibility. I never shut the door. I just take it one day at a time. But my biggest fear in life is that I will raise a bad person.
Do you think that's rational?
I don't let it govern my life because I think there's an appropriate time to worry and an inappropriate time to worry.
Right.
An appropriate time to worry is when you can actually take action to change the outcome. But if it's already decided, there's no point in worrying at that point. So I tell parents who have kids who are struggling with addictions themselves, I'm like, listen, like if your kid's out of the house and you can't cut them off financially, they don't want anything. If you've already done that, there's not much you can really do. It's like if you've cut the kid off, you've cut the financial support, you don't let them stay at your house, they don't have anything to take from them anymore. They just have to run its course. And sadly, you gotta, my father said the same thing to me too, and I'm taking the same approach with her. He said, Aaron, if you want to be a burger flipper, be the best darn burger flipper, because I care about you being a good person more. So, and same thing with her. I would rather have a good person who makes minimum wage as my daughter than somebody who is a total schmuck who is a CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
It's important you got your values straight.
And I'm not perfect, though. I get tempted by all sorts of random stuff throughout the day. I do. It's not like, oh, it's going to derail me, but just small stuff. Mm-hmm. Just selfishness. That's the one that still will creep up. And I'm like, I know it's the right thing to do, but I don't want to do it. And it's just a daily battle.
But what drives your behavior in your most important relationships? Like in your relationship with your daughter, she's little, but you have a relationship with her already, and your relationship with your wife, what drives you? Is it the selfish side of you, or is it the side of you that wants to do the right thing and be a good person?
Both. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with recovery. Like there's aspects where you should be selfish in your recovery, especially early on. It's like, okay, maybe don't bring some crazy person into your life. Like don't do certain things because you need to be selfish. You need to focus on yourself. But like later in, you want to be able to give it away. And it's similar to like my situation where like I want to be like selfishly unselfish with this situation, like in it, because it makes me feel good to put my efforts into these things that benefit my family. That's my purpose now. Like my purpose is to advance my family, protect my family, secure my family. And it's a lot easier, once again, with something that is not my mode of operation governing my life. And that's the thing, is my wife and I have both the same set of values, which I believe any relationship that is going to survive, you have to have similar values. You can have different religion, you can have different, whatever. Values are paramount. Don't have different values, it's... Yeah. I've seen people try to shove that square peg in a round hole. It's painful.
Yeah. Well, that's why we keep talking about values. It keeps coming up because it's such an important element of what has brought you from where you were to where you are today. You obviously have this genetic vulnerability to addiction. It's pretty astounding the way that you met your biological mother and found that you guys were Xerox copies of each other addiction-wise. I'm not saying otherwise, but addiction-wise you were. And then you also had that sort of environmental piece with your mom who raised you, who also had addiction. That sounds like it was pretty serious.
It was I'd say her major was depression with a minor in substance.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. It was there though. It was there, and you were observing it, and you were
rationalizing it,
and you were coexisting with it, and that does influence a young person. It exerts an influence on their vulnerability to addictive behaviors. So you had a lot of odds stacked up against you. What do you think you're going to do to try and insulate your daughter and maybe more children, if you have more, from going down that same path?
If my daughter has, whether it's a genetic predisposition, which I think there's highly evidence to suggest she does, there is a real world chance that there's not a damn thing I can do to stop it. All I can do is take mitigating efforts. And the number one that I have found at least from my experience and talking with others, is as soon as she can process anything, I have to keep a line of open communication that says, darling, my sweet baby, perfect angel, if you need to tell me something, you can tell me and I will not throw the book at you. We're going to process it. We're going to talk about it. And you might not like what I have to say, but it's going to get, where dad came from. You know where mom almost went, because mom almost went there as well. You know where we were. And I know that no matter how much I tell you that, you're still going to go and check things out for yourself. Just know, if you're at a party and you see something, you see someone overdose, God forbid, and it makes you feel a type of way, do not bury it. Talk to me about it. I'll tell you my experiences. Then we'll get ice cream. It's like we gotta talk like that. I mean, it's just 99% of times that I've seen people are like, oh my God, how did my kid get this way? He's afraid to talk to you. They don't want to talk to you about these things. It's just the kids, there's no line of communication in the household. There's not been a culture established in the home. Like, there needs to be a line that says, listen, like, time out, come together. Like, no punishment, come together. This is more important than anything else. I think that's something that more parents and more households need to adopt, is just like a timeout moment, no punishment, safe zone. You get a pardon or whatever, clemency, just whatever it is, just come and tell me what's going on. And I feel like that's the only mitigating effort that I could put into place, because she's going to be around it. She's going to go to parties. She's going to drink. She's going to try smoking weed. She's probably going to try coke. She's probably going to do ecstasy, all these other things. She's probably going to try this at some point. If she doesn't, I'm the lucky parent. And I fully acknowledge that. But that is also where faith comes into play, is I can pray to God as much as I can, and I will, and I do, watch over her, keep her healthy, safe, happy, all these things. But she's her own person. I'm going to lay down the law. There is going to be rules in our house. Is she going to skirt them? Yes, because she's my daughter. She's going to skirt the rules. Just if when skirting the rules, she encounters something that she doesn't understand, I want her to always know that she can talk to me about it, and I'm not going to beat her over the head with a baseball bat.
Because you're coming back to your dad's value of honesty. That's at the core of what you're describing, right? You want that honest core to be there between you and your daughter and maybe children in the future. And then you're also wanting to emulate more of your dad's parenting style, which you ran away from to go live with your mom. But you want to have those solid boundaries and consequences if rules are broken.
And I did this when I worked in the mental health profession. I worked with teenagers, and my job was to basically wrangle them. They would come to me from a halfway house. They were fresh out of rehab. They would come to me, and I was part of a program called Academic Success. And my job was, being somebody in recovery, to be with them during the day, help them finish high school while learning to apply what they learned in treatment into the real world, so they could help integrate back into their schools. It was me versus 12. And these were 16 to 18-year-old boys.
Wow.
Who were out of their minds. But I had a rule, and I'm going to apply this to my household with my kids as well. And yes, we do plan on having more kids. Listen, you guys could do whatever you want. You just can't do it here. That's number one. And number two is, you guys can overrun me if you really wanted to. Nothing I could do to stop it. Just know that for every decision, there's a positive and a negative consequence. The ball is in your court. If you want to make a bad decision, you are fully capable of doing it. There's not a damn thing I can do to stop you. Just don't come running to me when I have to call your parent and take away your home visit. That's not my fault. That is you making a conscious decision to screw up and then reap the reward of that. And I'd say about 80% of the time, I was able to hold it together over there.
That's impressive.
So that's what I want to try to emulate in my house too with my kids is, listen, I'm not going to stress myself out being a helicopter parent. No way. I can't. But I also can't have lawlessness. And I'm open to suggestions from the audience or anybody here for parenting tips. I always try to remain teachable, which is another core tenet of my belief system now, is always remain teachable. That's kind of, in a way, how we plan on trying to navigate the world of our children potentially having the same demon live inside of them. But there is one thing I think that I probably wouldn't do unless I've exhausted every other option, and that is send them to treatment when they're a teenager. I don't think I would do that. Life has not gotten bad enough for a teenager. They have not felt enough pain living in mommy and daddy's house to elicit the spark of change. At least that's what I've seen in my experience. First time I walked into a treatment center, I was 13 years old. It was actually, I went to a Utah wilderness program first, and then I went to a residential treatment academic school. I went there for a year after.
That's a long time.
Came home, and within the first week I was drunk. So take that for what it is, parents.
What worked for you? Because I think some of the sentiments you have around mental health and therapy, it made me wonder, did you try that and it didn't really help you? And from these experiences, it sounds like you're saying that.
So I had negative experiences with that, obviously. I've seen therapists, throughout my life. My mom used to take me to therapists, a couple therapists, really solid people. Helped me, conquer some weird demons I had, early on in my life. And so I don't have a negative view of it in general. But I think when it comes to kids specifically, teenagers, we still don't fully know how to accurately, and this is from my experience, we don't know how to accurately treat people, because at the end of the day, how I tell people like what my rock bottom is, because I think this plays into it. Like teenagers haven't been able to hit a real rock bottom. They haven't experienced life yet. So how could they really feel the consequences of it? My rock bottom, and I could sum it up into one sentence, is when I looked around and I realized I had no one else to blame for my problems. That was my rock bottom. And it was the worst and best place in my entire life.
How did you get to that though? Like what made you suddenly realize that you couldn't blame anybody else?
Because I didn't have anybody around me. Everybody left. My mom was dead. My dad told me not to be around his family. I would call my brother when I was drunk to yell about my dad. My stepmother and my stepbrothers didn't want anything to do with me, even though they loved me and they cared about me, but they couldn't do anything to stop me. I had alienated all of my friends. The only people that I hung out with were people who also liked to shoot meth. And even them, I had to contend with them, jacking me and beating me up. And, and I'd wake up in a pool of my own blood with my clothes gone or something. It's like, I had to contend with that. So that's my friends. I had nothing in my life. The only reason I was able to afford the apartment that I lived in at the time was because when my mother died, she left me $50,000, which I blew through very rapidly. And I guess that's when I realized I have no one else to blame for my problems. But I remember this is one of my earliest experiences with God. I wasn't in California. And I made a phone call and I said to my father, when I get back to Los Angeles, get me out of Los Angeles. And this was right after I met my birth mother. And he shows up at my door and I'm on a good one. And if anybody's listening to this has been in that mindset before, you hear a knock at the door, it's like instant panic. You're like, oh my God, SWAT team's coming in. But I calmly go over to the door and I open the door and my father is standing there. He goes, you ready to go? I'm like, where are we going? So we're going to rehab. We're going to the airport. And normally I would have slammed the door in his face and that'd be done with it. I said, okay. And I walked and I packed, I had this little red suitcase, packed all of the clothes that I owned, got in the car, went to the airport, went to treatment. Don't know how that happened.
So was that the treatment episode that worked, that stuck?
Yes, it was.
Okay. What was the treatment that worked? Was it the place you were in?
I've seen people get sober in a state-funded Skid Row treatment facility with bed bugs. I've seen people go to like places in Malibu, $120K for 30 days. They ain't doing anything. It's a spa. But you can go to really good places. I'm not knocking some of these places. Really good treatment. But then they leave and they relapse before they even get home.
Mm-hmm.
So
and that's happened to you before.
Yeah. So how do you explain? So the question is, how do you explain that? I don't think sure, you can offer, CBT, dialectical behavior, equine. You can offer every type of therapy you can. But if the individual is not yet ready to accept that help or have gotten to a place that their circumstances have gotten painful enough that they can soak in what's going on, what's the point? Hence why I won't send my daughter to a treatment center if, God forbid, she gets to a place like that.
Okay, so then let's talk about your faith, because we've been wanting to talk about this, and we've talked about it a lot, actually. But how did your faith kind of come together with that treatment episode, whatever happened there, and help you recover and get to where you are today?
Well, it didn't happen in treatment, I'll tell you that.
Okay.
A medical institution is not going to give me an idea of what God is. It's just my personal belief. Treatment centers prepare you to go to recovery programs. Mm-hmm. You learn about sobriety, but you ain't living sobriety in a treatment center. I don't care if you're there for a year. You're not living in sobriety. You might be sober, but you're not in recovery yet either. When I walked into a certain recovery program, I saw plumbers, I saw electricians, I saw tradesmen, I saw people who were stock traders, I saw every walk of life who were in this program. I remember how earlier I said, like, my father and I we didn't speak the same language, right? It was like I'm speaking Swahili, speaking English, whatever. But I walk into these rooms and these people are all speaking the same language as me. I could tell them what's going on and they're like, wow, guess what? I did that too. And I did worse, because it's always a one-upsman game because we still have ego. I was hit with the proposition because I was raised in a Jewish household, developed a resentment against it, didn't like the authority aspect, didn't like, especially that my father was the one telling me I got to do this stuff. Friday night, I want to go out with friends. You got to be there for Shabbat dinner. You got to go to a synagogue on Saturday morning. Dad, I want to sleep in. Why can't I watch cartoons? It's like resentment across the board. Then my brother, who's Orthodox, who, to some degree, I'm like, seeing him be successful with his life. He went to college. He's now able to like pay for things. Did I have a resentment against my brother? I don't know necessarily, but I do know I was resentful at the things that he had gotten in his life because he went the right path. My resentment against religion, I got hit with this too, and this is something I'll never forget. I was standing outside of a meeting, and somebody many more years and through this process as me comes out and says, I'm smoking a cigarette like I would always do outside. He's like, "What's your relationship with God look like?" I was like, "Oh, I hate God. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in it." The guy goes, "How do you hate something you don't believe in?" And it hit me in that moment. It wasn't that I didn't believe in something that was out there. I didn't know what it was. Yes, I was raised in a Jewish household, but at the time, I was also introduced to the idea that it doesn't have to be this. I just have to anchor myself in something that I consider to be objective truth, something that can restore me to sanity, as a certain program tells people. And all I have to do is make the decision and start pursuing it. And I was also hit with the realization that the novel idea that not only can I choose something that's going to help my life, just the only two rules is my person who would help me through my program, he said, it can't be me and it can't be you. I said, why? He said, because humans are fallible. And I said, fair enough, fair play. So that was like really the beginning of like my journey back to God. And whenever I tell my story, I always like to jump from part to part to part of when I experienced God, when I was still in active use, when I was still drinking, that I didn't realize it was at the time. Like I said, I'm a logical guy. And the amount of times that, when I broke down my process, they call it, some people would call it an inventory. When I looked at myself and I realized all the times I should have died, all the times I should have, had more legal consequences, all these things that should have happened to me. And it was in that moment that I realized it makes more sense to believe in anything than to believe in nothing. And all of those things that I just listed off being combined together led me on a path of, I don't have to name it. I just have to trust it. And funny enough, I do name it now because you can change it. It's a cool thing too. It's amazing, all these novel ideas I was introduced to that were like the acronym, keep it simple, stupid. The idea of a relationship with God is a lot easier than people make it out to be, at least in my opinion. I feel like people overcomplicate it a lot. They want to define it. They want to be able to pin it down and be like, this is what it is and this is how it operates and yada, yada. And I'm like, if God is so great, how on earth are you supposed to understand it 100%? How is that supposed to happen? Furthermore, how can you define it? And why do you think it owes you anything? And that's kind of ultimately what led me back to my religion that I was raised in. I'd be lying to say if I don't take away the same, if not more, from the New Testament scripture as I do from the Torah. And I openly say I would be a Christian. Just the only thing that prevents me from being a Christian is the biggest barrier is I don't believe Jesus Christ to be my Lord and Savior. But the lessons in James, the famous faith without works is dead from Alcoholics Anonymous, is from James. There's so many overlays, and I think people, what a big thing, because I've read multiple programs of recovery's literature. One of the lines stuck out to me, once again, from Alcoholics Anonymous text. Be quick to see where religious people are correct. And I combine that with another thing that basically says, nothing will forever keep a man in ignorance like contempt prior to investigation. And I said, why not? If I was willing to put out the spiritual bat signal then, why am I now being reserved in exploring Judaism again? Who am I to shut myself off from the potential things that could happen? And not to mention, I didn't choose to come back to Judaism. That wasn't what necessarily happened. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that I did want to be a active participant in my family's religion. That means a lot to me. Family means a lot to me now, where it didn't before.
Did Judaism have a role in bringing you and your family back together, in the course of your recovery and sort of making amends with them and rebuilding trust and all that? Was there a role of Judaism there?
Did the religion bring us together? No. Was there some things that happened that there's basis for in religious text, or I don't know, I can't rule that out indefinitely. Who am I, once again, to say these things? And that's kind of where I operate from now is, who am I to say A, B, or C exists or doesn't exist? I derive my connection with God very personally.
Yeah, you found your way. Okay, so I want to shift to talking about American recovery now. Tell me about your new show.
My name is Aaron Prager. I have a show on PragerU, Prager University, called American Recovery. We just launched the first episode last month. The format is basically similar to this. It's a one-on-one. I sit down with people from all walks of life and discuss ways on how to help people, how to bring clarity to a situation that, most people don't know where to even begin. And society's gotten better at the messaging, but we're not there yet. And, I want to do my part to be able to help people out with that. More importantly, though, it's not focused necessarily just on drug addiction or alcoholism. It's for everything in life. If you want to level up, this is going to be a show for you. If you want to engage spiritually, and part of that is first and foremost getting an understanding of what your pathway needs to look like. And it can look different, but there are some similarities. Admitting powerlessness, for one, that you can't control everything. Immediately followed by trying to anchor yourself in something bigger than yourself. And there's a whole bunch of other things that follow. Tenets like honesty, tenets like open-mindedness, willingness, a lot of these things, understanding what your character defects are, for instance. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, helping other people, being of service, all under the umbrella of something bigger than yourself that you can identify as something personal to you that's not going to let you down. That's what American Recovery is about. And it's kind of a play on words because we're at a place right now where an outsized number of people have a God-sized hole in their soul and they're searching for answers and picking ones that are very, very self-destructive while appearing to be very attractive.
So where do people go to watch American Recovery?
You can go to PragerU.com. You could view it there or on Rumble and on YouTube. So I know some people don't like YouTube, some people don't like Rumble. So you can pick your poison, whichever one you'd like. Just go view it, check it out, leave a comment down below, and consider making a tax-free donation.
And I'll be appearing on American Recovery. I'm super excited. I was hooked after the first episode, so definitely tune into that. I want to close with a couple of questions for people with addiction and for their families. From your perspective, what would you say is the single most important thing that you want people who are struggling with addiction to know that helped you find your way to the path that you're on today?
Well, before we could even get into a nuanced question like that, we're dealing with people's lives. We're dealing with people who are doing things nowadays, even some substance that maybe you don't associate with immediate death, but because of the prevalence of fentanyl now, you never know. And what I would like them to know above all else is you're worth it. The world will be a worse place without you in it. The analogy I like to say is just because you can't see the forest right now does not mean the trees don't exist. And that might seem weird, might seem crazy, but the world is a worse place without you in it right now if you let this overtake you. I thought personally that I was doomed to a life, 92 pounds, liver and failure, all these things. I'd never have anything to offer anybody. And 10 short years later, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think I've helped more people than I've hurt in my addiction. That's crazy. And this is putting in 10% of the amount of effort that I did into getting effed up every day. The short answer is don't give up. You are worth it. And there's a life out there beyond your wildest dreams, and you just need to put the glasses on.
That's so important because addiction is an illness that carries a very heavy weight of hopelessness at times. And so I think a lot of people who love someone with addiction and who have addiction who are listening right now need to hear that they're worth it and that there is a potential for a beautiful life on the other side of this. It happens for a lot of people. We hear more stories of destruction and death and terrible outcomes for people with addiction. That's more sexy in the media.
Yeah.
But for every one of those, there are probably 3 stories of recovery, healing, and a fulfilling life on the other side of it. That's what the statistics tell us, actually. So
if you're listening to this right now and you are feeling like taking your life, this is something serious and I don't joke about, I'm telling you right now, your addiction, your darkness, whatever it is you call it to yourself, because I know that at least in myself, I did not call it addiction. I didn't know what to call it, but I knew that there was a darkness inside of me. It was telling me that the people around me, my family, my friends, everybody, it was telling me that they would not care if I took my own life. It's a lie. It is lying to you. It is out to get you. It is its own entity. That is not you talking. Call somebody. They would rather you wake them up at 3 a.m. every day for 10 years straight at 3 a.m. than not have you in their life. I'm telling you this right now.
I'm so glad you said that. I have also spoken on my podcast about suicide and about the risk of suicide and reaching out for help and the importance of reaching out for help when one is feeling suicidal. And I will include some links in the description of resources for people who may be hitting that low. And then in closing, what is the single most important thing that anyone who loves someone with addiction needs to know from your perspective?
There's only so much that you can do to help that person. There's only so much you can do. My rock bottom was when I realized I had no one else to blame for my problems. And part of that was I wasn't being funded financially. I was not given shelter. That's what interventions are. Episode 1, Zach Livingston of American Recovery. If anybody's interested, you can go watch that. He's a professional interventionist, and this is what he talks about. This is what he deals with, is families who have somebody who is in addiction right now. You have to realize your limitations. And most of the time, you'd be surprised how much you're actually enabling the behavior to continue. The parents as well are not the alpha and the omega. It's called a family disease for a reason.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's one of the hardest things to do is setting boundaries with people you love, telling them no, turning them away. And there's a lot of places you can go to learn more about that, and I'll include that as well, because that is one of the hardest things. And with other guests I've spoken with J.D. Vance's mother, who I spoke with recently, she also alluded to that. She talked about her biggest enablers in her life and the role they played in her continued addiction over the period of time. Obviously, always coming from a loving place. They want to help. They don't want to see you without a place to live or without food or, without a place to go. But they unintentionally enabled her addiction to go on for longer because of that. So I hear what you're saying, and I think that is a not uncommon sentiment among people in recovery that I think people need to hear. So Aaron Prager, thank you so much for coming here today and sharing your story.
Absolutely, anytime.
Thank you for watching my fascinating conversation with Aaron Prager today. And don't forget to like my videos and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I look forward to seeing you next time.